Hello and welcome to the second part of our GIF tutorial. So in the last part we used iMovie to trim down our movie file that we had made with the camera, and in this section we're actually going to start working with Photoshop and finalizing our GIF. Now the reason why we trimmed it down is just because Photoshop can take quite a long time to open a movie file, so the shorter the better really. Of course, if you start with a super short movie file from your camera, Photoshop could actually be used for editing all the way through. The first thing you're going to want to do is that a lot of the functions to do with working with GIFs in Photoshop are actually only work in 34-bit mode. So I need to go into my applications folder in the Macintosh hard drive, and I'm going to do Command I on the keyboard, or you can also do a right click and go to Get Info. And what we need to do is just make sure that we have this box ticked here saying Open Photoshop in 32-bit mode. Generally I use 64-bit, but for the purposes of this particular technique, you're going to absolutely need to use the 32-bit mode. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Photoshop. And then what we're going to do is, you'll see down here I have a slightly interesting window open. This window is called the animation window, and in terms of getting your workspace ready, it's just kind of nice to have it open and ready when you start using Photoshop. So then we're going to go File, Import, File, Open, and then we are going to find our movie on the desktop. And so it's called GIF Trim Movie. Open. And this can take a while depending on how long your movie is, of course. Now I'm going to just point out the obvious mistake with this. First of all, you can see that the light changes part the way through that clip, and that there's also some movement there. And that was the first clip that I sort of did in the editing section of the iMovie tutorial, and I thought it was pretty precise, but it turns out that it actually had some shadow and it also moved a little bit. So this just really highlights how important it is that you A, use a tripod, and B, pay attention to your lighting conditions, and sort of try and keep everything standardized between your still shot and the animated shots. But that's okay because I can save this. It's salvageable. So what I'm going to look for is a nice point where the pendulum is starting and then going from side to side. So I'm actually going to start a little bit early because you always want to give yourself more film than you actually need, because Photoshop is not the most precise at trimming. You can zoom in a lot, but it's not really like optimized for editing as much as you would hope perhaps. I've heard that CS6 will be even better than this. Okay, so we are looking for the metronome to do a movement from side to side a couple of times, and then ending back up in the center. Now we don't get that there, so let's see if we do that. So I'm just moving the toggles at either side to kind of select my video, and I'm actually going to make it bigger so that I can get even more precise with this. So let's move from here. So we've got each of these frames, and then that's great because that finishes right there. I'm going to take it one more frame out just so I have, or even a couple, just so I definitely have enough frames to work with here. So there we go. Let's end it at 4.04 frames. Okay, so once you have your area selected that you would like to have the movement from, so I'll just preview it one more time. There we go. Then what you need to do is actually export it and render the video. So the settings that we're going to want to use are H260, actually my bad, we're going to want to use animation settings with a fast start. Now I have done a little bit of investigation and we actually cannot process 1920 by 1080 in the GIF format. So what I'm going to suggest is probably NTSC DV and just go with the 720 by 480 and we'll see how it performs on the big screen, and if necessary, you know, we can change the settings and resample it later. So go give it a new name, so I'm going to give it the name GIF trim PS, render, replace, and then once that's done, it's going to be available on the desktop for you to open up in the next step. At this point, I'm just going to skip forward a little bit to show you what we're aiming for. So I put a delay on my very first frame here, and I'm just going to hit play and show you what this is going to look like. So right now, this whole loop of slides is set to play forever, or frames rather, not slides. So I'm just going to stop that and go back to the previous step, which happens after we've done our export of render stuff. So what I do recommend though is getting your layers palette handy, because you're going to be working with it a lot. So I'm just going to put it over here for now so it's handy. It's right here on the right hand side. So if we go to File, Import, Video Frames to Layers, we'll go and look for our PS file, so GIF trim ps.mov, hit Open, Make Frame Animation is ticked, hit OK. It's going to take a moment. Once you have that now into your animation timeline, what we're going to do is go back to our layers and take a quick look. So what we want to do is make sure that layer 1 is the layer we want. So right now, if I make this invisible, you'll see that the layer 1 is actually the metronome arm going out to the side, and I don't want that to be my layer 1. So what I'm going to go and do is skip up a little bit further. So you can, if you move through the timeline, you'll see it makes a layer visible that corresponds to it. So right now I can see that layer 9 is in fact the layer that I want to be using. So what I'm going to do is, and this is a little counterintuitive, but I found that it works best this way, is to get rid of the layers I don't want first. So I'm going to select those by hitting Shift on either end and then putting them in the trash can. And then that makes the corresponding frames on the timeline go away. So then I'm going to throw those in the trash can. So now all of these are going to be relabeled, and you're going to be starting with layer 9, but confusingly it's going to say 1 in the timeline. So what you really want to do is just kind of be careful about that. So we're going to skip through the timeline a bit and decide where we actually want our little moving segment to stop. I want to get as much of the metronome movement in here as possible, but I want it to also return back to that starting position or close to it. Okay, so that's still kind of out on the side, so if we go back a few steps here, should be able to see where it stops in the middle. Oops. There we go. Looking at frame 38. Okay, so everything post frame 38 we're going to want to get rid of. So because we're kind of out of number here, you're going to see that frame 38 corresponds to layer 46. So I'm going to go and get rid of everything after layer 46 and just throw that in the trash can, and then that's going to clear all of those frames out. So then I'm going to hit the Shift key on one end and Shift key on the other end, and I'm going to throw all of those in the trash can. So now I should have the animation that I want. Now we need to make just a little window for the animation to appear in, because I want it to be a still image for a while on a delay, and then I want everything to show up. I want the motion to kind of show up when I want it to, if that makes sense. So I'm going to make a copy of layer 9, and both layer 9 and its copy need to be available. And what I'm going to call this is layer 9 mask. And I'm going to add a mask to it, which is this little icon down the bottom of the layer dialog box. And with the mask selected, so you need this little bounding box around it, I am going to make sure that I'm on that layer box, and I'm going to use the marquee tool to draw a big box where all of the movement occurs. And then I'm going to hit delete, and you'll see that a black box appears, which is the mask that's going to be where all of our action happens. So now I'm going to add a delay to the first frame because I want it to wait for a little while as a still image before it starts moving. So I'm going to put a 2-second delay on that first frame, and if all goes to plan correctly, let's make sure it... There we go. So you got a 2-second delay, and then it is still again, and then it moves again, and then it is still again. So now the other thing is, if you had like a much smaller area of movement, you'd want to maybe use a mask that was more refined than just drawing a big old square. So if you ever wanted to do a mask that was, say, just like a smaller area, if you do a new mask, you can use things like the actual marquee tool and stuff like that to actually draw around an area and take that out. So you could take out the whole metronome if that was, if you're so pleased. But yeah, that's how you would do more precise kind of masking, and you might need to even apply it to all layers. So if you had like a girl's hair blowing in the breeze or something, you're going to want to make sure that you apply a masking layer to every single layer. So now we're in our saving settings. I just want to draw your attention to a couple of things. So you want to make sure you have GIF selected, perceptual, diffusion, have the transparency switched on, and I also have to point out down here that I had to change the image size to 720 by 405 because I actually found that it was too large to process, probably in Photoshop. Also, you want to make sure your looping options are set to forever and that you don't exceed 38 or 40 frames, otherwise you're going to have a lot of processing issues. One more thing before we actually save it is to make sure that in your timeline in the animation that you select, so when you're selecting these different frames, watch out in your layers area that when you're selecting frames 1 and 2, both the your bottom layer and your second from bottom layer are selected, and then from that it should then skip up through the layers, and then it should work in terms of your animation. So that's kind of an important thing, just to make sure that your masks actually work the way you want them to. So now I'm going to save for web devices again, and it takes a little while to load up for the save for web devices, and then I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to call this metronome 3, and I'm going to save it to the desktop. And now I should be able to preview it. Now, a tip about previewing your file, you don't really want to open it up in preview because it's going to show up as a kind of file folder. The best way to preview a GIF is to open it up in a web browser. And et voila, we have our GIF. Fantastic.